Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adult Forum for Sunday, November 22nd. We're doing something a little different. I had this idea that we could talk about nonviolent resistance because it's a deeply, deeply Christian concept. And in the last year, in the last 6 months, there has been a lot of upheaval politically. There's been marches of all kinds, people protesting many different things. And there's been a lot of criticism about what should be done, what Christians should and shouldn't be doing, what's the appropriate way to protest, so on and so forth. So I wanted to have us just explore that a little bit in a Bible study format. So like I mentioned, nonviolence is actually at the heart of Christianity. It's a huge key to the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, but it's also a powerful force that's capable of changing the world. However, nonviolence is difficult to do. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of maturity, and it's not how the world behaves. So it's easy for us as Christians to get sort of sucked into the domination culture that's out there, revenge and power and whatnot, partially because it also feels instantly good. Like it's sort of a quick fix. Feels powerful for that moment if we get a win. But as Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. When we look at the long game, we see that to be true. So other methods have to be used for change and for transformation that is positive. So we're going to look at that. One of the things I found super helpful in this book called Engaging the Powers, he has this cool graph. Oh, and now I'm not even going to find it. Yeah, I did find it, only to lose it again. He has this really cool graph where he contrasts the two worlds. The domination world, or I could even say the shame world, and then the nonviolent domination world, or the beloved realm, you might say. Let's just talk about what these two worlds look like, and then let's see which one sounds like God, which one sounds like Jesus, okay? So the domination system has this hierarchy of sexes and genders. It is power over, it is about controlling. And when there's an encounter, there's a winner and there's a loser. Situations are to win or to lose. That's just how everything is seen. You have a man or a woman, one of them has to be on top. That's just how it is. If you have power, it's because you stepped on somebody else. In this realm, politics is authoritarian. There's kings and Caesars. There's people who will not be denied, who have a lot of control and power, who smash their opponents. That's just how it is. The economics and the ecology, the way the environment's treated, is very similar, meaning it's about greed and exploitation. So people, water, rivers, air, land, animals are all there to be used and abused for their monetary value. When you look at religion in the domination system, you often have a male god who is wrathful, punishing, gives laws, and ironically, there is this sense that this is an evil age. Yes, it's such an evil age, and justice is in the future. Justice is in heaven, far away. So relationships in the domination world often have things like slavery in them, racism, classism. Again, somebody's on top and then there's stratifications underneath. So if you look at that too, even in family relationships between a husband and wife, someone's got to have the pants, someone's got to be in control, right? And someone has to be subordinate. Often with sexuality then too, there's this sense that there needs to be control of sexuality, and often women are subordinate to a man's control. The way in the domination system that you may make transformation is you go to war. You have violence. You use force in order to have change happen. And it's not Could be good change, could be bad change, but that's the way you do it. Finally, Education, it's indoctrination. Again, it's about control, if you're getting the theme. The theme of the domination system is that you have one person or a group of people who are in power over all these other people, and they will use any system that they can apply in order to have what they want. When there is conflict, the people in power will try to suppress it through any means necessary, through demonization, criminalization, denying that there's even conflict. And probably the biggest sign of a domination system are things like a cross. So you have disrupted the peace, you've disrupted the powers, you've disrupted the status quo, you've caused conflict. You are now a criminal and you're going to be killed for everybody to see. That's the peace of Caesar. That is a domination system. It creates a lot of shame and fear. It creates the need for people to prove their worth being treated at all as with dignity or honor. There's winners and losers. It's profit over people, and compassion is seen as weakness. It's seen as pathetic. I'm wondering if you are starting to hear that this sounds familiar at all. By contrast, the beloved realm of God, the kingdom of God, operates on a very different way. There's equality and equity of people regardless of their race, their class, their gender, their religion. There's the sense of honoring and dignity that all people receive. Power is used to give and to support and to nurture. There's win-win, there's cooperation. If you have power, you use it to help other people have power too. It's not over and against. Politics is decentralized, it's diplomatic, it's enabling, meaning it gives other people the ability to do what they need to do. The economics and ecology, again, it's about sharing, it's about sustainability, it's about equality, it's about responsibility to others. Religion, too, then, is seen as inclusive. There's both and images of God and ideas. Justice and eternity are now. And think about relationships. Relationships are equal and flexible. There's respect and there's trust between relationships. And I'm talking about male and female, romantic relationships, familial relationships, as well as between all people. Also, you have this sense that you transform things through negotiation, through nonviolent confrontation and conflict resolution. That's what's interesting, is that there's still conflict. There's still problems. There's no illusion this is utopian. It's just the way you go about addressing and fixing the problem is a completely different way of navigating, a completely different system. Sexuality then is in the control of the hands of the individuals. They're themselves, but it's in light of community values. So it's not completely immoral, as the fear of the domination system may say. They may say, well, if you don't control it, everybody does. If you don't tell them exactly what to do, it's just going to be like people will do whatever they want to do. And that's not necessarily true. Finally, education is enabling, meaning empowering. It is making sure people are able to do what they need to do. And if you have conflict in this system, there is truth-telling, there's repentance, there's forgiveness, and there's reconciliation work. Meaning you acknowledge there's a problem, you bring all of the facts and perspectives to light, you seek out ideas and solutions, and there's communication and there's a change. Instead of suppressing, there's not a problem here, everything is fine, you come against me, I'm going to smash you, right? Very different perspective. Think about what this creates. This creates acceptance, it creates transformation, it creates empowerment. Compassion is seen as a strength, because if you have compassion, you're able to collaborate better, you're able to empower other people better. This is the peace of Christ. We're going to look at the Bible here. So, first, I'd want to acknowledge that the Old Testament has a lot of violence, but it's not necessarily God's desire. It's tricky because you have things like Noah's Ark, which is an incredibly violent story. God saves Noah and his family and the animals, but then kills everything. You have the 10 plagues, that is very a violent reaction to the gods of Moses. When Joshua goes into the promised land, there's genocide. It's genocide. And over again, you see examples like this, and yet many people have interpreted and said, is this really what God commanded? Or were these things that happened because this is what the people saw? And another way to look at it is that they were acting in ways that were acceptable for that culture and that time and place, but that there was always an asterisk next to their behavior, that they had to do things, slightly more ethically than, for example, when Joshua goes in, they're not supposed to rape and plunder the places. They're just supposed to straight out kill everything and not take slaves, not rape the women, not take all the gold and like other places would. So you have that, but I personally, seeing what Jesus is like and seeing what the cross is like, really believe that a lot of these stories we're reading are those people's best understanding of what was happening at the time. That we're always filtering God through us, through our context, through our culture, through our personality. And there's moments throughout the Old Testament where God seems to break through the culture with glimpses of the beloved realm. And this is what I think is really important. In a culture of domination and violence, you have, like in Isaiah, multiple chapters of God talking about justice and mercy. I'm looking at Isaiah 58, if you want to. This whole thing is really, really good. So Isaiah is proclaiming, "Shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask me of righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. You fast only to quarrel and fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is this not the fast I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke?" And of course, Isaiah 61 is very famous because Jesus even quotes it in his first sermon. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Spirit has anointed me and has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, to release to the prisoners, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." You have in Amos another prophet. So the prophets actually get us a lot closer to understanding the beloved realm and this nonviolent world than some of our other stories do. Very, very similar. God says to the people in Amos chapter 5, beginning at verse 21, if you want. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs, and I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We also have Micah 6, verse 8. Again, God is talking about sacrificing, because this was the biggest way that people would worship, is they go to the temple and offer a sacrifice, an offering to God. And so this was such a huge part of the Jewish tradition that to criticize it was pretty shocking. But it says, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself down before God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old?" Sure. "Will the Lord be pleased with 1,000 rams and 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He's told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God?" So the Old Testament is very complicated, and we would do well to actually sit at the feet of our Jewish brothers and sisters who've been interpreting the Old Testament for way longer than us and have really, really great insights. But basically, the concept of justice in the Old Testament is not of revenge or punishment, but of the making right, of the redemption of all. There is this idea that throughout the Bible, God is working for liberation and for healing, for making the world whole. And you see that in the prophets. You see that in specifically these stories where people are speaking on behalf of God in difficult times, often against a domination system. So when the people of Israel become the domination system, the prophets show up. When they were suffering under the domination system, like in slavery, God freed them and then tried to shape them so they wouldn't become it. But inevitably, they did. Now, if we shift and go to the New Testament, there's a lot we could look at in the Gospels because Jesus operated off of nonviolence. But he did it in a very powerful way. Because it's important for us to remember that nonviolence doesn't mean pacifism. It doesn't mean, not pacifism, but rather to be passive, to just let things go by. There's a misunderstanding in some of the things Jesus taught in Matthew 6. So if you actually want to go to Matthew 6, he gives a lot of Matthew 5, actually, a lot of understanding about nonviolence. And it's hard for us to understand some of what he's talking about. So let's take a look at that. Chapter 5, verses 38. "You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go a mile, go also the second mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you." This sounds like Jesus is telling people to just be suckers, right? This sounds like Jesus is saying, let people do to you whatever they want to. That's completely not understanding the context of what Jesus is saying. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was a way to limit violence. That was a way to say, hey, if you punch me in the eye, I'm not going to cut your head off, right? That was to prevent escalating violence. But Jesus is basically saying, let's not play the violence game at all. Let's play a different game because it shakes things up. Because if you otherwise just keep doing eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as otherwise people have said, it leaves the whole world blind and toothless. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Now, one of the things we don't know is that in that time, if you were to strike a person with your one hand, you were saying, you're my subordinate, you're a slave, you're worthless. But if you strike them with the other side of your hand, you're saying, it's like you're my equal. you're an equal partner and we're fighting together. So if someone strikes you, they're going to strike you like you're a slave. And if you say slap on the other cheek, that means they have to use the other part of their hand or their other hand exactly instead, which would mean they'd be treating you like an equal. And that would confuse the person. Part of it, it's confusing. You're reacting in a way that is not what they're expecting. You're confusing the script. And by confusing the script, you reveal the other person for the violent person that they are. That's what nonviolence does. If anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. Cloak, they're talking about the underneath cloak, which would leave you naked. That's like saying if somebody wants your shirt, give them your pants and your underwear too. The only difference is in Jesus's culture, for someone to behold a naked person, that was shame on them. Literally, the shame was on them. That was horrifying for them. So you're putting them in a super awkward position. If somebody comes at you with a lawsuit, you're basically saying, yeah, you can take my everything. And they're like, no, keep it on, never mind. The same thing is true. If anyone forces you to go a mile, also go the second mile. The only people who forced anyone to go a mile were Roman soldiers. They were legally allowed to grab a person and say, carry my pack for a mile. But actually they weren't allowed to do more than a mile. So here these people were being oppressed by the Romans and they had no retaliation at all. And so they would carry these packs for a mile, but then if the Roman soldier was like, okay, well, thanks, slave, you can go back to whatever you're doing. No, I will carry it an extra mile. Well, no, you can't do that. Yeah, no, I will carry it an extra mile. No, put the pack down. So it's changing the script. It's changing the narrative. It's revealing the oppression for what it is. That was what Jesus was doing. So that's the whole point is that you don't play their game. You start to reveal the people for who they are. And Jesus does this the best when he's arrested and he is on trial. All these people are accusing him and falsely accusing him, and he's silent. He's not arguing, because for him to try to argue is to be playing into their game of lies and false accusations. It almost for him would be saying, hey, this is a just trial and I'm trying to win it. But he knows that the whole system is bonkers. And so he's just quiet. He's not going to play their game. And that kind of freaks him out. It freaks Pontius Pilate out, because Pontius Pilate even says, why don't you talk to me? Don't you know that I have the power to, kill you? And Jesus is like, yeah, you don't have any power over me, which freaks Pontius Pilate out too. And then finally, when Jesus dies on the cross, it is the ultimate show of the domination system. It is, here's a person who would not play with the status quo, who did not play with the powers, who did not stay in his place. And so we're going to punish him with absolute violence and humiliation and shame. And then God raises Jesus up from the dead. God's like, that's a fun game. I'm not playing your game. I'm not playing your game. And I'm going to show you that I'm not playing your game by raising Jesus from the dead. If God was still playing the game, maybe Jesus would have gotten off the cross and fought the Roman soldiers. Maybe Jesus would have come back from the dead with a bunch of angelic armies and destroyed all the Pharisees and the Roman soldiers. He didn't do that. So God just opted out of that whole narrative and just said, no, I'm not playing your game. Jesus is going to come back to life and we're going to go about being all about forgiveness like we were before. So that's what's so cool. In the history of the world, we can see leaders who've used nonviolence, used Jesus as an example of nonviolence, like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Desmond Tutu. A lot of civil rights had nonviolent resisting. And just, 93, 97% of the Black Lives Matter marches that happened this summer were nonviolent. And I witnessed quite a few of them. And they were beautiful examples of dignity and honor and loving your enemy, because we live in a domination system, that was basically drawing attention to the domination system. That's the whole point of the Black Lives Matter, was that the police system is part of a domination system. And so they're trying to reveal that for what it is. But what does power do in a domination system? They suppress, they force back, they demonize, and they criminalize. And so the whole movement had a real media bang-up job of criminalizing and demonizing the movement, calling it a terrorist organization and whatnot. So that was just really, really frustrating to watch, but also predictable that that's what happens. I want to read you a couple awesome stories of examples of people who did not play the domination game and did some nonviolent resisting. A Black woman was walking in a South African street with her children when a white man passing spat in her face. She stopped and said, "Thank you. Now for the children." And he was so nonplussed he was unable to respond. Desmond Tutu was walking by a construction site on a temporary sidewalk the width of one person. A white man appeared on the other end, recognized Tutu, and said, "I don't give way to gorillas." To which Desmond Tutu stepped aside and made a sweeping gesture and said, "Ah, yes, but I do." Chinese students forbidden to demonstrate against government policy donned masks of the communist leadership and carried signs that said, "Support martial law, support dictatorship, support inflation." During the struggle of solidarity in Poland, one group dressed in Santa Claus outfits distributed scarce sanitary napkins to women as a way of dramatizing the difficulty of obtaining essentials. When the Santas were arrested, other Santas showed up in jail, insisting the others were frauds and they were the real Santa. So there's quite a few stories of how people have cleverly tried to reveal the powers that be for what they are, unjust. And one of my favorite stories of that was about the freedom riders in the civil rights movement, where all they were trying to do was ride the bus in a non-segregated bus. And it's a pretty great documentary if you want to check it out. But basically, the coolest part was when this bus got arrested and hauled off to jail, another bus showed up, and another bus, and another bus. And their goal was to fill the jails completely to capacity. And so it was 10 people, and then 50 people, and then 200 people arrested, Black and white people arrested. And they all filled the jails and were singing together. I mean, what a sign of unity and lack of fear. I mean, courage in the face of domination. And it worked because it drew attention. It freaked out the guards. They realized their control they thought they had wasn't there. And that is the point. So again, nonviolence reveals the oppressor for what they are. It disrupts the status quo and the business as usual to get attention. Nonviolence doesn't mean to do things legally, because in a domination system, things that are just and good might actually be illegal. And things that are legal might be terribly unjust. So shocker, we live in a domination system in America. And our church has historically been a part of the domination system. I mean the whole Christian church. You could argue whether the Lutheran church has been a part of that or not, but the Christian church as a whole has definitely been a part of the domination system. If you think of the Inquisitions, if you think about the Crusades, so many other things where they used force and power and indoctrination. Domination system. We know that in our country and in our world, people are being victimized by this domination system right now. So it is part of our call as Christians to disrupt and to disobey this system. And yes, it may actually mean doing illegal things. If it is illegal, for example, to stop traffic, to do a nonviolent demonstration, to have 200 people lie down on a road so that no one can get where they're going, that might be illegal. And those people may be arrested and then have records. That's what civil rights people and suffragettes and all sorts of people have been aware of this whole time. That absolutely they're going to jail for this and it's illegal. But the point was to disrupt the system. When a person stands in front of a violent person and they do nothing, and the violent person's being all violent and yelling, it reveals how gross that other perspective is. Some of you may know that Ruby Bridges, it was 60 years ago that Ruby Bridges, the little girl, went first into the integrated school. And there's pictures of the vitriolic hate on these men and women outside of the school. The way that they were yelling and the things they were saying revealed that whole perspective of segregation for what it was. Gross. Bad. If they had been there holding hands and chanting and singing Kumbaya, you might have wondered, which side am I on? But when you see that vitriolic hate, when you see those words coming out of their mouth, when you see violence in word and action, that's the point, is you start to wonder, is that the system I want to buy into? So I hope this was interesting for you. It's definitely challenging for me as a Christian to think about. It's very challenging because it makes me realize that disrupting the systems that are in place is part of my call. But how do I do that? Which issue do I want to focus on? How do we do that together as a group? There's so many questions and ways we can go about transforming a system and hopefully making the world we live in less about domination and more about the beloved realm and the ways of God. Thanks for joining, and if you have any comments or ideas, please shoot me an email. Bye.